Well, we missed last week.
We did, but that's okay.
Yeah,
We've done this for 3.5 years.
yeah.
We're allowed to miss every now and then.
No, that's pretty good. Yeah, and it's funny is I get together with some high school friends, and of course, high school brings out drinking and what have you, and so I took some athletic brew.
Oh, nice. You did?
Yeah, I did. To say, hey, you know what? There are some non-alcoholic options. I came
Awesome.
home with a lot of athletic brew too.
You couldn't sell it. They weren't interested.
They weren't as interested as I was. I was drinking it, but yeah. So you get your athletic brew tonight?
I'm switching up. I got my A&W cream soda zero
Oh, there you go.
sugar. Well, the sponsorship hasn't come through yet,
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah. Right, right.
I said that was going to be it.
We're gonna work on it. So I'm trying to work that angle. Oh
It's
man.
so good. So,
Yeah.
John, weather's changing.
Yep.
It's getting kind of chilly out. How's your training been?
Reasonably good. Getting ready for Indian Wells, which will be the last event for me for 2024, and so trying to cram some mileage in as best I can at this point. So yeah, weather's changed, daylight savings, getting darker, shorter days, but you try to do what you can do. And I've done a lot more indoor riding this year than any other year, so
Yeah.
it's been an interesting way to go this year.
It's so funny that when the time changes, it's harder to train.
Yeah.
You know, I was driving home from work. I think it was Wednesday night, and it was like 4:30,
Hmm.
and it's just dark, and I'm like, I plan to go to the pool
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
right, and it was everything I could do to get myself to go.
Yeah. Right.
Where in the summer, 4:30, there's lots of daylight left. There's
Yeah.
lots of
Yeah.
it feels like the end of the day,
Yeah.
right? Because and then I knew that I also had a ride I was going to do that night.
Hmm.
So okay, how do I how do I get past this? And I'm like, I have to almost mentally like lie to myself that hey, it's
Yeah.
not dark, you
Right.
know. And you get in the pool and it's bright and everything, but then there's a window and you look out. Oh, it's dark outside.
Yeah. Right. Right. Right.
It's weird how that
Yeah.
really does affect us
Yeah.
and the motivation to train. I don't know. Do you have something similar like with your motivation to train when it's
So
dark?
it's interesting because I was thinking about this, especially as we were starting to put together our ideas for tonight. Back in high school, our practices for swimming and soccer or any sport that we did was always in the afternoon,
Yeah.
after school. So it was whatever, 2:30, I forget what time we get out, 3, 4. I wouldn't be getting home until dinner time. And so my workouts were always in the afternoon. Now, at some point, our swim team, we did start doing some morning workouts, and we hated those. We dreaded them as a high school student, trying to get there before, homeroom period. It was really a lot of work. So nowadays, though, I'm the exact opposite. I very much enjoy working out in the morning, and then my afternoon workouts are like what you're talking about. They're really hard. I really have to, make sure that if I had something planned in the afternoon, that I do really, I have to push a little bit more to make sure I get outside that door and get something going. So I guess I guess where I'm going is it's a little bit different. I've flipped over the years in that doing afternoon workouts was good and morning was hard, but now morning workouts are easier and afternoon workouts are hard.
But do you think that like the light makes a difference for you too? Like so during like before the time
Yeah,
change, the morning it wasn't getting light until after 7,
right, right, right.
right? And so those morning workouts, if you're going, let's say, to the pool at 6
Yeah,
and it's still dark, to me
hmm,
that's harder than
it
if
is.
if
Yeah,
it's light in the summer, it's light at 5, getting up and going is not nearly as
yeah,
hard,
yeah. No,
right?
you're spot on with that. Is that just trying to, yeah, if the sun's not up, it's definitely harder to do outdoor type of workouts, even indoor. Just not having that sunlight. And of course, we have our colleague Dr. Graham McGinnis that looks at circadian rhythms and how important that sunlight and exposure to sunlight is to get the day going.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, right? So like in triathlon in Las Vegas in particular, we have colleagues and friends that are shift workers
Yeah, right.
that actually do have to train at night.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really a challenge. I've talked to a few of them about how difficult that is for them to actually, finish work at 2 in the morning
Yeah,
and then go do their training session.
right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tough thing to do, especially when it's so dark. So yeah, very very interesting stuff. And the circadian rhythm stuff
Yeah.
is, is really cool. I was actually talking to some of my students this week about this, about when you do blood testing,
Mm-hmm.
how especially if you're doing any hormone blood testing, you have to do it at the same time every day
Okay.
or every time you do it, and it
Yeah.
should be actually even be the same day of the week.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You can have circadian changes. I know with Dr. McGinnis, we talked about social jet lag, right? So
Right.
if you're up late on Friday and Saturday night, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
things ultimately change. And then really taking into account even time of year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because circadian rhythm for example, in the summer might be different than in the winter. And if you're really sensitive as things, and particularly things like thyroid hormone, which
Mm-hmm.
is really, really hard for people to dial in. Like people that have hypothyroidism, it's really hard to dial in exactly their dosage of their like synthroid or whatever that case may be. And they're doing it off of the blood test. And I think that there's some wiggle room there based off of the circadian rhythm. And yeah, just
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the circadian rhythm and daylight savings does disrupt our sleep patterns, and
Yeah,
sleep is so important to so many aspects of our health and even our ability to train.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's get on to the main topic of tonight.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
our topic tonight is going to be looking at number one, the where people come from into triathlon, the different sports.
Mm-hmm.
So whether they're a swimmer, a biker, a runner, or maybe none,
Yep.
and some of the differences between if you were or if you are one of those athletes, maybe a runner, or a swimmer, or a biker, what the difference is in the training.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's hard for some time for people to conceptualize how it is different. Like we're not like John, you don't train like a swimmer, you don't
Mm-hmm.
train like a cyclist, you don't train like a runner. You train like a triathlete.
Right, right.
And I think that sometimes as triathletes, we get caught up into, oh well, this is what the pro cyclists are doing, or
Mm-hmm.
elite cyclists are doing, and I should be doing that,
Yep.
rather than thinking of triathlon of it's not one sport, it's
Mm-hmm.
three sports. So that's kind of an introduction to what we're going to talk about. Did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, it's such a great topic, and it was neat when we just were sitting there and came up in conversation, and what was what's the origin sport for someone who's gotten into triathlon? What's their gateway sport? Because the vast majority of people have not had the opportunity to participate in triathlon as a youth now, because there just is not that build out of youth triathlon, either elementary school or middle school or high school. These just don't exist. Now there is a push to build that out, but most of us have never had that opportunity to participate. So now you're coming into triathlon as an adult, most likely. And so now, what sport did someone do previously as they entered into the triathlon journey? I can tell you, with the Las Vegas Tri Club member spotlights that we do, I always like to ask that question: what was their sport background? And it is amazing how variable the answers are. Sometimes it's basketball, sometimes it's dancing, sometimes it's running casually, sometimes it's competitive sports at high school or college. But it is all over the map. So I actually searched for some data on this, and I could not find any data on what the origin of the sport was for triathletes. And so I think this might be a good project for one of our grad students or undergrad students at some point.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then the other context is, what if they had no sports,
Say
right?
again?
No sport background.
Oh yeah, no, totally. And some of the interviews we've done, they've had none. Was,
Triathlon was my first thing. I was
yep.
35 and
Yep.
I have a friend that was
Hmm.
I did a triathlon, and I was like, oh, that actually looks like something I want to
Mhm.
do.
Yep.
And no background, maybe I mean PE class and like
Mhm.
that kind of thing, but
Yeah.
not no formal like sport background.
No
And
team sport, no individual sport, nothing. Yeah. No, that there is that group of triathletes that have come that way.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So when we think about that, John, and I'm just going to ask you this, is there an advantage to have done something prior?
Hmm.
What do you think?
Well, we're relying on anecdotal information at this
Right,
point
because
because
once again,
we
yeah,
just couldn't find anything. And I think, if I was going to try to answer that question, I would want to start thinking very broadly about what makes a successful triathlete or what makes someone enjoy triathlon as an adult. And in some sense, I think it's a mindset of how to go about training for an event. We always say you got to enjoy the journey. So on one hand, you need the personality where you can figure out what is the best training program for you, and then stick with that over a period of time. Is that enhanced by participating in sports earlier? Possibly, or but it's not a requirement.
well, there is some, if we look at just on the other side, physiologic, there
Hmm.
is some evidence that if you were doing aerobic training when you were younger,
Hmm.
that that actually carries forward.
Hmm.
And one of the things that it's interesting when I got back into triathlon, I can still remember some people asking me like, "Well, what did you do when you were like you're a good runner? Like,
Right.
what did you do when you were a kid?" And I'm like, "I ran."
Yeah. Right.
I didn't. I had a bicycle. I didn't like
Hmm.
bike. I wasn't a
Hmm.
bike racer, but I did cross country running and I did
Yep.
orienteering
Yep.
um and I think that helped with the aerobic development and same with the team sports athletes. Like I've known several triathletes that were soccer players,
Hmm.
right? And so they've built an aerobic
Yeah.
base.
Right.
And I think when you build that as a child, at least what I've read in the literature, it actually does carry forward, and it
Hmm.
carries forward long into life.
Hmm.
Whether that's a VO2 or just purely aerobic
Yeah.
capacity, I think that there is something to it, and even once again, anecdotally, with some of the people that I've coached,
Hmm.
not having the background, because there's a couple of people I coach that don't have any background of sport.
Hmm.
They are very difficult to work with as far
Hmm.
as like their base level is in my once again, this is anecdotal, is
Yeah.
not
Right. Right.
as good as somebody that once again did something when they were younger,
Hmm.
even if they
Yeah.
took a hiatus.
Hmm. Well, and it brings to this issue of nature versus nurture. It's are people getting involved in sports at a young age because they're seeing some success, and is that the nature, is that the genetics? And then the people who aren't seeing success at a young age, do they gravitate towards something else outside of sports? Or is it, nurturing and getting the training response? It's a great question, and it's there's a lot of layers to it because it's, the other aspect of getting involved with sports at a young age is, do you carry that forward throughout your lifetime? And there is, evidence of kids not continuing in the sport that they may have been focusing on as a young age, that they don't carry that forward. But that's where triathlon can actually be a sort of a safety net for that.
No, no, for for sure,
Hmm.
right? um it was interesting when so my wife, she swam in college,
Hmm.
and when she stopped.
Hmm.
She was burned out. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
swimming in college is hard. I mean, you
Hmm.
did it,
Yep.
right? It is a very, very difficult thing to do. And any collegiate sport is extremely difficult.
Hmm.
And we look at burnout rates, and we look at, when they finish their time, it's very often that they never do that sport again.
Yeah. Right.
And I love the fact that we have triathlon because it actually is a gateway back into
Yeah.
the sport. And it doesn't have to be like the yardage that they were doing or the intensity that they were doing, and it can bring joy back to their lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and there are data supporting that someone who spends so much time in one sport, they do tend to not carry that forward throughout their lifetime. But in terms of going back to what you were asking before, in terms of being in sports at a young age and the benefits of that, I think the other part of that is that someone gets used to doing that training and it becomes part of their lifestyle. And like we were talking about earlier, afternoon high school sports, that was just what the afternoon was spending time doing sports, whether it was, practicing for swimming or soccer or whatever it was.
Yep. No, maybe we were also, you and I were fortunate that we had the opportunities,
Yeah,
right?
that's right. Mm-hmm.
And not everyone has those opportunities either.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny. I often think about this is if we just think about when you're walking around. Let's give it an example of where everyone's got to go. So the DMV, right?
Mm-hmm.
Department of Motor Vehicles.
Yeah.
If you were to take all those people out of there, let's say you took 100 of them,
Mm-hmm.
how many of them genetically are really gifted athletes that never had the opportunity
Right.
or never had the direction or the
Mm-hmm.
support,
That's right.
right? They're sitting around with a natural VO2 max of like 60,
Mm-hmm.
let's say.
Yeah.
They have
Right.
they have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's chiseled
No.
around, and it's a really an interesting thought process when you think about how many people are like that.
Oh, totally. I mean, this is the issue of trying to broaden sports into a variety of different socioeconomic, areas. And some areas just do not have equal access to doing different sports, let alone doing triathlon. How many schools have a pool to do swimming, or where, for triathlon, where could they do an open water swim? And so there are some real, economic issues when we're looking at who is able to get involved with sport in general and triathlon more specifically.
For sure. So let's talk about. I mean, if we're good on that, let's talk about the differences between being, for example, a swimmer,
Hmm.
cyclist, and a runner, and being a triathlete.
Yeah.
Now, I can only speak to being a runner coming
Yeah.
into
Right. Right.
triathlon. You can speak to being a swimmer and
Yeah.
coming into triathlon, but we have some data, and we kind of know what a lot of these sports entail as far as the
Hmm.
training. And what I'd like to do is maybe talk about like a typical swim work or typical swimmers workouts and volume and time compared to
Yeah.
a triathlete. So should we start with swimming?
Sure. Yeah. That's
I
a,
mean,
that's a
it's
good
swim,
one.
bike, run,
I know.
right?
Yeah. Let's do it. I like it.
So let's hypothetically say you are once again an age grouper. So
Hmm.
let's throw out like you're a 40-year-old, and you're doing masters swimming and I'm talking masters racing. So kind of same level of like if you're doing triathlon racing. What do you think as far as time, maybe time a week? How
Yeah.
many hours do you think they're swimming? If
So,
they want to be competitive.
yeah. So someone who wants to compete in U.S. Masters swim meets,
Yeah.
and the swim meet would be the same type of events that you would see in a collegiate competition or the Olympics, whatever, wherever you see swimming competition. So short, 50 to 100 yards, 100 meters, 500 meters, maybe 1,500 meters sometimes in a Masters meet. Um, the Masters swimmers would likely be putting in over 20,000 meters or yards, whichever way you want to look at it, per week, and maybe even approaching 30,000 for a Masters swimmer.
Yeah. Yeah. So 30,000, let's say that's on the high end. And,
Hmm.
and
Yeah,
and
yeah,
maybe for the very, very elites, the people that are
right,
winning nationals,
right.
maybe even more than that.
Hmm.
And so when we're talking about hours, that could be, I'm just guessing 8 hours.
Yeah, that's probably about right. I mean, 4 days a week, 2 hours a day, something like that, or 5 days a week, hour and a half, something along that lines. That'd probably be about right. Yeah.
So 8 hours a week.
Hmm.
So to me, oh my gosh, if I could do triathlon on 8 hours a week, I'd be so like, I'd
They're going
have a
crazy.
lot. Right. Like, but think about that. Like,
Yeah.
so that's the first, kind of comparison we
Hmm.
have is just looking at like the top elite.
Hmm.
Not and I'm not trying to be elitist saying triathletes are
Right,
better.
right, right.
in any way. I'm just saying there's a difference here between an elite swimmer and a triathlete.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because we think about it like, and I guess we haven't really talked about this. Elite age group triathletes, like that are going to compete at nationals and trying to qualify for like a 70.3 worlds or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at 15 to 20 hours a week.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? So, and then let's just talk about the swim volume for an age group triathlete.
Yeah.
So, John, you're an enigma when it
Thank
comes to swimming because you swim
you.
every day, and
Yep.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
So you're once again you're atypical, I think, when it comes to triathlon swimming.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the people that I work with, it's usually right around 3,000 a session, 3 sessions a week.
Yep.
So 9 to 11,000 yards or meters per week.
Right. Right.
Right. And the thing is, we swim slower than these age groupers.
Mm-hmm.
So the time is the time is somewhat variable, but I'm thinking like 4 to 4.5 hours
Right.
of just swimming.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then the next question is, and we've talked a little bit about this before, is within the individual sessions, it should be, in my opinion, quite different.
Right. Totally. But it depends on, so yes, and I actually agree with that, but I also put a little asterisk over that because it does depend on the type of swimmer you're dealing with.
Yeah.
And so if you take someone who has never swam before, even in a pool, and then let alone out in open water, your swim workout may look a lot like a master swim workout or a high school or collegiate type of structure of a workout where you're doing a good mixture of drills and using different types of tools, fins, pull buoys, pull paddles, snorkels, whatever it is. You're trying to learn the best technique, and so it really does take a lot of effort to learn a good swim technique. And so I think in that sense, you'll see some parallels between what swimmers would do and what that type of triathlete would do. But to your point, I think preparing for a 1.2 mile swim, preparing for a 2.4 mile swim, the base structure of your workout really needs to be quite different than what you would see at a master's level or a swim team or college or high school.
Because if you're preparing, and once again, the typical master swimmer is because I've swum with the masters team.
Hmm.
Right? If they race, they want to do 100s, 200s, 50s.
Yeah, yeah.
Very few of them want to do the 400s in the long.
Hmm.
Like, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I mean, I know there's some, but
Right.
so you're preparing for something quite different.
Yep.
And because once again, to swim fast for 100 physiologically is a different. I mean, a lot of it's a different energy system
Hmm. Hmm.
than once again 1.2 miles in open water.
Right, right.
Um, and I took the swim coaching course from U.S. Masters, and I was, I'll say it. I mean, they can take my certification away if they want, but in the live sessions, they had many swim coaches complaining about triathletes,
Mm.
and saying, well, triathletes, they don't like to do this and they don't like to do that,
Yeah.
and I'm like, well, why are you trying to change like the triathlete? Like, why
Hmm.
don't you understand them and understand where they're coming from? And one of them was like, oh, they don't like to do kicking drills.
Hmm.
And I'm sitting there like biting my tongue. I'm like, well, maybe they had a 3-hour bike ride
Right.
earlier that day or an interval session that morning, and you throw a kick drill at them and they're going to cramp up,
Hmm.
right? Or their legs are kind of done. And one of the things that I work on with some of the triathletes that I coach is actually, and I'll say it, kicking less.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because we tend, for example, if you're a runner, particularly if you come from a run background, you tend to have too much knee flexion
Hmm.
as you kick, right? So I need to teach you not to have as much knee flexion, so you have less drag, and so by doing more and more kicking might not be the right thing. Kicking properly is maybe important, but anyways, these are nuances, and
Yeah, yeah.
there's differences there. And I think that finding, for example, this is for people that are like going to go, because people say, hey, join a masters team is a really good thing to do for a
Mhm.
triathlete. And I agree, as long as your coach understands what you're trying to get out of it,
Mhm.
rather than trying to fit you in with the people that are trying to race 50s and hundreds.
Yeah. Yeah, and I actually agree with that as well in terms of if someone came to me and said, "What do I do to improve my swimming?" I said, "Go join a master swim team because you're going to learn a lot about swimming, especially if you don't have a swim background. You're going to learn how to swim different paces. You're going to learn different strokes. You're going to learn different techniques. You're going to learn, in essence, a better body position in the water." And so all those things come with a lot of those drills and a lot of the, even the short, the short sets, because you're learning how to swim at different paces. Now, that being said, I personally like to look for the minimum effective dose for swimming in biking and running. What is the minimum yardage or time that I need to feel like I'm getting prepared for an event? And so this is where I won't do some things because it takes too much time out of the day to be able to do that, whatever that is. And you mentioned kick drills. I probably haven't done a kick drill in over 20 years. Why? Because that's not going to help me at this stage. That's not going to contribute to where I'm at with swimming. But do I recommend people to work on kicking? I do. I talked with someone just last week about figuring out that timing of kick between the arms and the legs and learning that coordination. Sometimes you have to do all sorts of swimming to figure out that coordination, and that's a lot of what a master swim workout will be, is give you a lot of variation in what you need to do, and your brain starts to figure that out. So it is a time issue. And if I can go in and get a 30-minute workout and that's my minimum effective dose, then that gives me time to spend doing something else, whether it's biking or running as well.
No, I totally agree. And I didn't mean to kick or to just say just kick drills. I
Yeah, yeah.
um I I personally, don't think backstroke is going to really help your triathlon swimming. Once again, if you're limited in time, right?
Right, right.
If you have all the time in the world and it's the off season and you want to
Hmm.
do some backstroke, great.
Hmm.
But in season, and once again, we're talking minimum effective dose because you're training 16 to 20 hours a week,
Right.
and you can do an extra 600
Hmm.
freestyle or an extra 600 backstroke.
Yep.
You, in my opinion, you should be doing freestyle,
Yep.
right?
Well, and your spot, that's what I do. I do very little other strokes now because I know what my minimum effective dose is. But if I'm working with someone or talking with someone who needs to learn swimming better, I tell them do all the drills or do all the strokes, because sometimes you don't know, oh, if I learn how to swim on my back, somehow in a weird way, that might actually help you understand how to swim, on a prone, and, in a freestyle or cross stroke type of deal. So it really does sort of depend on where the swimmer is. But for fitness, if you're getting ready for a 1.2 mile swim, you got to be able to swim 1.2 miles.
So once again, I'm gonna be devil's advocate with you.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you have people run backwards a lot to get ready for their triathlon?
No, but that's not the same. That's not the same.
Why
No,
is it not? It's
no,
motor control, it's
no.
balance, it's
Yeah.
timing, it's
Well, to that point, I do run in the water, and I do plyometric in the shallow water, and so in that sense, I am giving variation of running. In fact, I'm doing double runs right now, and I run in one pair of shoes in the morning, and I run in a different pair of shoes in the afternoon.
you're running backwards in the water.
Yes, actually, I do. I
I know
do.
you do.
Yeah, when
I
I
know
have,
you do.
in at the UNLV pool, because there's a shallow section, I actually do alternate running forwards and backwards in that shallow. Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. So the one other one that, and we've talked about this before as well, is that for triathletes, actually for swimmers, I mean, technique is super, super important,
Yeah.
right? And one of the things that I noticed early on when I was doing master swimming is the coaches that I was working with, and I'm sure the coaches I was working with were doing the same thing in other groups, because I've actually
Hmm.
joined other groups, and very, very little rest.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, okay, 100 hundreds and you get 10 seconds rest.
Right. Right.
Sorry, 100, 10 hundreds, sorry, 10 hundreds and you get 10 seconds rest. And to me, I actually think that if technique is super important,
Hmm.
as you become more tired, your form gets way worse.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so having longer rest is important. Actually, on some of the swim workouts I actually write for people, I say, okay, you're going to do it on this rest. However, if you don't feel like you can keep your form,
Right. Right.
add 10 seconds, add
Yeah.
10 more seconds, take one off even, right?
Hmm.
If it's 10 100s, take the sixth one off,
Hmm.
refocus yourself and get your technique back.
Yep.
And I do John, I do the same in running.
Yeah.
One of the things I do a lot of with people is actually we call them broken runs,
Hmm.
where you run 20 minutes, you get a break, or you get a rest. You run 10 more minutes, you get a rest, and so they can actually run with good technique.
Yeah.
And in the running world, there's a lot of evidence on that preventing injury,
Hmm. Hmm.
rather than just slogging along and the
Yeah.
form gets worse and worse and worse. And I think it's the same in swimming, but swimmers don't tend to do that.
Hmm.
Because, and I think a traditional swimmer, their form is really, really good. Like if you've swum your whole life,
Right.
the form doesn't break down nearly as much as a triathlete who
Hmm.
is once again only swimming 3 times a week for maybe 10,000 yards.
Hmm. Yeah, I think this is where having a coach that understands how each swimmer is unique, and can tailor the workout to that swimmer's need. I think that's where this becomes important. Back when I coached swimming, I would have one group of swimmers in one lane doing one type of workout. I'd have another group in another lane doing another type of workout, and they were of similar ability. And it's that type of approach that you're talking about, and which I really like, is you're trying to make sure that they're swimming as well as they can swim for a period of time, and then recover, and then do it again and do it again. That repetition, is important. I think though, and I think what you're really good about recognizing is, for a triathlon, at the end of the day, you can't just take a cookie cutter swim workout from a
Yep.
swim book and say that's what I'm going to do for triathlon prep. They are different. And I recognized that even after I got done with swimming in college and I got into triathlon. I was like, okay, well, I don't know, I don't need to do this type of workout anymore. I need to do more of this type of workout. And then that even transitioned from, hey, maybe this isn't even the best workout. Maybe it's this, because I learned more about triathlon swimming, which is, it's different. You've got to learn how to pace. You've got to learn to swim without, the wall, and being able to sustain a pace for a long period of time. And so that there's different things you can do in a swim workout for a triathlon that you wouldn't do for a swim workout for, a swim competition, and vice versa.
And you're right. And paying attention to to that. And the one thing that I work with a lot of the swimmers I work with is swimming efficiently.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. And like we call it like distance per stroke, and
Yeah.
how important that is in the open water,
Right.
especially when you're wearing a wetsuit,
Mm-hmm.
because the buoyancy is there, and you get a good distance on every stroke, and you can relax on every stroke, rather than, for example, doing a lot of 25s and
Mm-hmm.
50s, where it's like it's turnover, and turnover is important to be fast.
Yeah.
you know I want you to get out of the swim at 1.2 or 2.4, whatever, 1500,
Mm-hmm.
and actually be not dead.
Yeah.
Like you stand up and you run to your bike, and you're not
Mm-hmm.
I can't, oh my gosh, I'm so tired. That's, once again, that's not what we're doing here. If you're doing an open water swim race,
Mm-hmm.
sure, great, put
Yeah.
it all on the line and you finish with nothing left. But we still got, in a half Ironman, you still got 4 hours to go,
Yeah.
right? And if you were all glycolytic and and not anaerobic, but you know what I'm saying, like a high heart rate or threshold the entire swim,
Yeah.
you can't be threshold for 5 hours or 6 hours.
Right. Well, and I think this goes back to where we're trying to put the context on the type of person we're dealing with. And
Yeah.
so if we go back to the idea of what was your sport background, and someone comes into the sport and says, "Oh, I, swam Division 1 college."
Different story.
Okay, what do you do with that swimmer? You're going to say, you know what, we're going to really cut back on the time you're spending in the pool. In fact, you probably need to spend the least amount of time in the pool, and we need to do more biking and or running. But then again, your flip side is an adult onset swimmer, someone who's taken swimming on and had never had that swimming experience. That could be a very different type of workout that you build into someone. So it's really, that sport background, if it is swimming, you're on one trajectory that's going to be different than if someone comes in with a sport background from running. They're going to be on another trajectory once they hit that pool.
I have one person I coach. He sometimes watches the podcast, so he knows who he is. He literally will do 2 or 3 swims before a race. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
rest,
Right.
he was a very good collegiate swimmer.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I need.
Right. Mm-hmm.
My running is not very. It's not terrible. It's not my thing. So I need to spend more time on that and more time cycling.
Mm-hmm.
Again, minimum effective dose. It's like
Yeah.
I can be first out of the water and swim 3 times, literally 3 times.
Yeah. Right. Right. Right.
Right. So why would I do all this stuff to get so I'm a minute faster
No,
getting out of the water?
no, no, that's
Like,
right. And now you have time to do other things. And
exactly.
yeah, I probably swim far more than I need to, but I enjoy it. I enjoy going to the
There's,
pool.
there's a
And
difference
that's
there.
right. And so there's that value that I get from swimming. I always feel better after swimming. And so I even try to leave it as my last workout because I just it's a good feeling. And when I'm done with it, most of the time, I'm done with the workout. So, but everyone needs to learn a little bit more about swimming in a wetsuit, swimming in open water, swimming with waves, swimming into the sun, sighting, swimming straight. And those are all skills that you don't learn in a pool. And, that opens up, more time that someone needs to put into the sport. But
No, it's really funny. And I know we're going long on swimming, which is fine because we can tackle the other things
yeah,
next if we want. But so every time I go to San Diego, I bring my wetsuit
yep,
and I want to get in at
yep,
least one ocean swim.
that's good.
Why? Because I I just don't get that opportunity,
No,
right? Or if we go visit my wife's friends, they live up in Portland. There's a few lakes I know that I can go
mhm,
in and I can get a swimming in the lake.
yep,
And we I know we have the lake here, but for me, it's quite a commitment to go to the
yeah,
lake.
right,
Or
right.
even anytime I go to the lake here, even if I'm coaching or doing something else, I always get a swim in.
Yeah, right.
If it's 20 minutes, it's
Hmm.
right. It's important for me because I just don't get that many opportunities. Once again, if I had a house on the lake, it would be different. It would be a different story.
Yeah.
But I don't. Yeah.
Well, and again, once you take that swimming background, and when I get an athlete and they say have my background in sport is swimming, that's often where I go is, well, what's your open water experience?
Yeah.
Because there may not be any open water experience, and then it's all the things of being in the water. It's not clear. You put your hand in the water, you may not see your hand. You may be swimming off the San Diego coast and running into kelp or seaweed, or maybe a sea lion swims underneath you, or the waves break a certain way, and that can be very unsettling even for a collegiate swimmer. So uh, there is a whole nother layer of swimming for triathlon.
Okay, let's change it. Let's talk about cycling.
Okay.
So, first of all, maybe there's animosity between swimmers and triathletes, but there seems to be an animosity between cyclists and triathletes.
Yeah, sure, there is. Yeah.
And I, and I don't know why. I mean, I've
Yeah.
never had any issues with cyclists. I don't like riding with cyclists, but I mean,
Yeah.
it's just me, not because purely for safety, to be completely
Hmm.
honest with you, is I don't feel safe in a big group of
Hmm.
cyclists on the road.
Right,
Like
right.
I've
Hmm.
heard too many people talk about, oh, so and so crashed and took out the whole peloton, the whole group. I don't really want anything to do with that.
Right.
Um, but anyways, so let's take an once again an elite-ish age group cyclist.
Hmm.
What does their week look like, John? Do you know?
So the two places I've seen people come to triathlon through cycling background has been road biking, like what you're talking about, more Peloton style, which also includes time trialing, and it can be, some variation in type of road course, whether it's more of an open road versus a crit, where there's lots of turning that's going on. And so there's that type of cycling background, but then there's also mountain biking. And I've seen a number of athletes come into triathlon from mountain biking, and this is a very different type of biking at that point in terms of upper body strength and balance and skill set, to maintain that, not fall over, keep the rubber side down. But for road cycling, I mean, they're biking. If you look at category two or three cyclists, and one is the best, two and three, four and five, or five is more the mere mortals. You're looking at people who are probably spending at least 200 miles a week on the bike, if not more. And 200 is probably a conservative number to be a competitive Cat 2 or Cat 3 rider. You're probably doing 300, maybe even 400 miles a week on the bike.
And so the hours end up being pretty similar with a cyclist and a triathlete as far as the
Yeah,
total hours per week.
yeah,
Because if you're 300 to 400 miles, you're looking at 15
right.
to 20 hours.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's very similar
Yep,
as far as the commitment and the time. Yeah, I know some of the more elite like Cat 1 and Cat 2 guys, even in Las Vegas, and they're doing 300
yep.
400 miles a week
Mm-hmm,
is not out of the realm of possibility, and it's pretty regular, I think.
mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's a lot of time. Now there, so a triathlete then, in turn, maybe once in our top age groupers, what do you think, John, as far as miles? Right.
I think some of our top age groupers are doing over 200, but hardly ever over 300. I'll hear over 200, over 150 for sure, over 200, and but not. I haven't heard really anyone doing anything more than 300.
In once in the people that I work with, and we're looking at kind of upper end is 150.
Yeah, yeah.
You start, and then that's on their big weeks, right? Like they're going to do like 100 miles on a Sunday.
Hmm, hmm.
Maybe we get to 180.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think 200 is for miles is getting to pretty rarefied air out there, and
right.
so you're looking at 10 hours
Yeah.
uh,
Hmm,
of cycling a week, and then the focus can often be different as well,
hmm.
right? So within the cycling world, the races are different,
Yeah.
right? In in cycling, in particular, I think the big difference is there are within a cycling team, and a lot of these people are on cycling teams. There are roles to be played,
Hmm, hmm.
right? So you're a sprinter, you're a time trialist, you're a this, you're a that. But everyone is going to kind of stick with the peloton for a long period of time.
Hmm.
And so, and the peloton, if you've ever done, and I think you've done some road racing, I've done some road racing as well. Every time you hit a roll or a climb, it goes from, you could be at 100 watts cruising along in the peloton
Right.
to 300 400 watts.
Yep. Hmm,
They literally try and break the peloton up sometimes every single, especially with age group racing,
hmm,
every single climb. So
hmm.
it's very stochastic by nature.
Right.
And where triathlon at the very highest level, pro triathlon can be stochastic because people try and break each other,
Hmm.
but for age groupers, that's not a thing.
Right.
You know, yes, we've talked about before, we go a little bit harder on the uphills and a little less on the downhills, but we're just
Hmm.
talking about nuances of 10 15%. A road cyclist will be, once again, it could be 200% difference when
Yeah.
they go up a climb, um, compared to where they're kind of their base, and their base can obviously, it can be literally zone one resting.
Hmm,
Like in a
hmm.
peloton, you could do 100
Yeah.
watts, and
Well,
not really, like I've been in some pelotons. I'm like, I'm not doing anything.
yeah, right, right. No, and that is sort of the strategy in a the Peloton type race is to pedal the least. Because and
Yeah.
that's that stochastic nature is that you're trying not to work hard at all when you're in the Peloton, but then you've got to be ready to work a lot. at certain parts of the event.
So the training reflects that.
Yeah, right.
And so it's the same thing. Like if you were to work with a cycling team,
Hmm.
could you become a better cyclist?
Yeah.
You sure could. Would it help your triathlon? Maybe,
Hmm.
but remember when we're talking about like 2.5 hours at 85% of your threshold,
Right.
that is a completely different thing than even a 5 hour, four
Yeah.
hour race, a cycling race.
No, and you're spot on. And when I talk with someone about, biking either with a group or individually, or if it's someone with road biking background, I usually talk with them about being able to sustain your own effort for 3 hours, and that sometimes is the challenging part because they're so used to being in a group and changing their pace and effort throughout a 3 hour ride. But I also talk with people about, hey, go join a group for a
Yep.
few reasons. One is if you're new to the area and you don't know the routes, go join a group and you will learn, the best places to bike because they've really got some, good routes picked out. It also really does help to get some bike skills. And it does get you comfortable biking with other people near you. And that does happen during races. I mean, we have races that get very congested at time at, triathlon, even though there's, no drafting, you still end up having others around you, especially on multi-loop type courses. So there is a comfort zone that people can get in riding in groups. And, then there's the social aspect. It's just fun. I like joining a group every now and then, and
Oh yeah.
just for catching up and riding and sharing stories and doing the B group is what I would do. Maybe C, just have fun.
Yep. Yeah. And once again, I'm just talking about the differences. I'm not saying right or
Mhm.
wrong. Like
Yep,
once again, for a cyclist, they're doing exactly what they should be doing.
yep, yep.
But if you want to once again be the best triathlete you can be, you need to think of the triathlete and the triathlon training.
Mm-hmm.
Because once again, you're not going to get paid in a triathlon for a 15-second sprint at the end of your stage,
Right, right.
right?
But at the same time, you and I would both recognize that ability to have a workout where all of a sudden it's an all-out sprint for just a short period. That can pay off huge in a training response down the road race.
Yeah, in a road race for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, and then there are people that hire cycling coaches, and
Hmm.
once again, it's completely fine as long as the cycling coach understands what you're trying to get out of it,
Right.
and that you're not doing a crit race, and you're not doing this, you're not doing this, you're doing basically you're doing. It's weird too. You're not even doing a time trial,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you have to run off of it,
Right.
right? Like, and they have no, just so you know, it's well, not they have none,
Mm-hmm.
but very rarely do you have a 2.5 hour or a 5 hour time trial. Like
Mm-hmm.
I know in Great Britain they have there's a big thing to do 100-mile time trials, which are
Yeah.
super cool. I'd love to actually do one time. But in North America, I don't know of any. Like I don't know. I'm sure there are some, but it's most of the longest time trials we see are 40 kilometers or
Yeah.
25.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And once again, you don't have to run off of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I've done them. I've done some 40K time trials. They're awesome. It's
Yeah.
super fun. You feel like you're going to throw up the entire time. It's great.
Right.
But that's not triathlon.
Right. Right.
Right?
Well, aquabike, multi-sport at least.
Yeah, and aqua bikes are
Yeah.
great. I love aqua
Yeah.
bikes. The same thing is like you can go absolutely all in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot like a time trial.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. And as far as people coming into the sport, once again, like you said, I think I've seen more like you. I've seen more mountain bikers
Yeah. Right.
come into the sport, and mountain biking is even more stochastic by
Yeah.
nature.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think that there's few of the mountain bikers that I've talked to that have come into triathlon were just really shocked at how poor they were actually riding the bike.
Oh yeah.
They're like they have been mountain biking for
Yeah.
years,
Yeah.
and they get on a road bike and
Yeah.
they say, okay, we're gonna go 40 miles and we're gonna hold this
Yeah.
wattage for 40
Yeah.
miles, and they get done with them like, oh my gosh, that was the hardest thing I ever did.
Yeah.
And where I can't ride a mountain bike like they do,
No.
like with,
No.
with the surges that they have,
Yeah.
because once again, it is so different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Or how about running, John?
Yeah, let's talk
Lots of
about.
people get to triathlon from running.
There's a lot. I would probably just, again, anecdotally say that this is where most people enter triathlon from is, background of running, maybe not competitively in high school or college, but doing a 5K, doing a 10K, half marathon, marathon, participating either in fun runs or, participating as strong runners and age group competitive and maybe even overall running. It is a pretty common pipeline to get to triathlon from running. And unfortunately, a lot of times they discover triathlon when they get injured running.
Yeah, I was going to say it's funny listening to your other podcast where you do the member spotlights. I mean, I can't count how many times we've heard that story. So I
Yeah,
was doing marathoning
yeah,
or half marathoning, and I got injured, and
hmm
I started swimming,
yeah,
or I got on the bike and I
yeah,
started biking,
hmm
and I'm like, oh, I kind of like this. It's
yeah,
good.
right, right.
It's a very typical pipeline
It
into.
is.
It's kind of sad that that's the pipeline into triathlon is because you got hurt running.
Yeah. Well, and it speaks to the sport. It's a very, it's a sport that people are very susceptible to overuse injuries. And we always joke that and it's a terrible joke, but there's three kind of runners: those who are injured, those who are soon to be injured, and those who are recovering from an injury. So it's, pick your bin you want to be in. And that's usually associated with the volume of running that runners do.
So typical volume for let's just pick a half marathoner
Yeah.
that's competitive, right? Like, and I'm saying like at rock and roll marathon, a half marathon, they'd be like top 10 in their age group
Yeah, they're probably easily over 40 miles a week.
easily.
Maybe even getting up to 60 or 70 miles per week. The elite runners, they can do 100 plus miles per week, but as an age grouper competitive, you're probably in the 40 to 70-mile range, and that's a lot of mileage.
And compared to a triathlete,
Well, same context of an age grouper.
yeah,
I think you're looking at a triathlete who's doing between 20 and 30 miles per week, maybe getting up to 40 miles per week, especially if you're looking at, something like an Ironman. But really, 20 to 30 miles per week is probably pretty typical. I mean, what are the numbers that you see either with athletes you coach or other coaches you talk to?
funny because one of the things that I tend to do with people is I tend to make them run less
Yeah.
because once it, it's funny. A lot of people come to me as a coach because they've been injured.
Mm-hmm.
Like I need structure and I don't want to get injured anymore. And I look at their plan and they were doing like it's not an atypical thing for them to look at a marathon plan
Yeah. Right.
and try and follow the marathon plan to get them ready for an Ironman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they're doing 60 miles a week or 50 miles a week,
Mm-hmm.
and or they're doing too much intensity.
Yeah.
And because runners can actually get away with some more intensity because they're not doing as many hours,
Right.
right? And they're doing their intensity. For example, you look at a typical training for a runner, and it's 6 days a week, but they're timing their intensity very smart.
Mm-hmm.
When they're the freshest, they do their intensity. A typical triathlete, I hate to say it, is very rarely fresh,
That's right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So you got to be very careful with your intensity and your intensity distribution.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for example, like you do a big ride on Friday, or sorry, Sunday. You do your 5 hour bike ride. Monday is not your day to do intensity.
That's right.
Monday,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or your brick run. Once again, an elite triathlete, different. An
Mm-hmm.
age grouper,
Yep.
your brick run should be easy.
Yep.
It shouldn't be, hey, let's go get off of the bike and then do sprinting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's a recipe. That's a recipe for disaster. So I try and tend to get people lower
Yep.
for an Ironman. I'm looking at like max 40 miles a week,
Yep.
max. And
Right.
that's for somebody that has a running background.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? If somebody doesn't, I'm like 30.
Yeah.
And that's like max. And it's weird. We've talked about this before. I'm also a big proponent of you don't need to run 22 miles
Right.
to successfully do an Ironman,
Right.
right? And This is interesting. I had this conversation with someone I'm coaching. So for their last 70.3, they only got to 7 miles
Yeah,
of
right.
actual, like that was the longest run they did,
Hmm.
and they were fine. They were able to do it.
Yep.
But because of, we were trying to ramp them slowly so they didn't get
Hmm.
injured, and that's, you got to be careful, right? With especially with running, and we were talking about the injury rates. Just because you have to run 13 miles on October 10th, if it's August and you're only running 3 miles,
Hmm.
the ramp rate shouldn't be dictated by the race you're going to do. It should be dictated off of your physiology and
Right.
where you're at.
Hmm.
And you only get to where you get.
Hmm.
Would I have loved to have that athlete get to 10 miles? Sure, but it wasn't in the cards for them, and they were, still successful. And I think once again, in running, in the running world, if you're going to do a marathon and do it, especially marathon, and you're going to do it well, everyone says you have to do a 22-mile run.
Hmm. Hmm.
But triathlon, I don't think you do, because once again, we just talked about, you're already riding 200 miles a week.
Right.
You're swimming 10,000 yards a week. You're aerobically,
Yeah.
you're there.
The engine is being built and trained. It's just a matter of getting the run mileage and that durability and specificity to running. And I agree with you. I don't think you need as much running that way. And if you're going to get hurt in triathlon, it's pretty typical to get hurt from running.
Well, and I think it's funny in triathlon. I think it's actually a combination of
Hmm.
being fatigued and running.
Yeah.
People say, "Oh, it's the running that got me hurt." Well, it was, but you were so fatigued from the bike rides that you did that when you did run, you were running on fatigued legs,
Hmm.
and that contributed to it.
That's an excellent point. The running statistics, or excuse me, the injury statistics for triathlon looks a lot like the injury statistics for running, but the mechanism for the injury may actually be quite different between the two. But it's a running. If you take running out of triathlon, you're not going to have those running injuries. Obviously, that was a stupid
No,
thing to say,
no,
but
no, you're exactly right. But John, but I love that you brought this up, because this is the evidence-based triathlete, right? The running statistics, the injury statistics are very similar,
right,
but the volume of running is significantly less.
right.
So then why are the injuries
That's
the
a good
same?
point. Yeah, I like it.
They're the same because of the fatigue you're building from the other sports.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to respect that as a
Mm-hmm.
triathlete.
Yep.
And you and I are always talking about the minimal effective dose.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And mine, probably my most important thing, like with the athletes I work with, is once again convincing them they don't need to run as much
No.
and don't need to run as fast.
Mm-hmm.
And I've talked about this. If you're going to do a 70.3 and your goal run pace is 9:30,
Yep.
why are you doing sprint intervals at 7
Yeah. Right. Right. Right.
or a tempo run at
Mm-hmm.
8?
Yep.
That is a completely different thing.
Time efficient. Yeah. You got to pick your workouts that are appropriate for what you're doing. So
And how you're going to be, what your physiology is going to look like
yeah.
3.5 hours into the race.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's not the same as, and it's something that's hard to wrap your head around, especially if you come from a running background. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, my half marathon time is 1:30. Okay,
Right.
great. Not after 3.5 hours of already doing something else.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's, nobody runs their half marathon in a 70.3 at the same pace they run it open.
No, that's true. So if a runner comes into a triathlon,
Yep.
you've got to back them off on running
Yep.
and then spend more time biking and or swimming. And I hate to generalize, but a lot of times it's the swimming that a lot of runners need to learn that.
Yep.
And then the biking seems to come well to runners. Again, total anecdotal, observation and generalizing, but
It's exactly the opposite of what you just said with the swimmer, right?
yeah,
It's like
right.
the runner might actually be a lot better off swimming 5 days a week.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Right?
right.
And what I've been reading on this is like frequency is so much more
Mm-hmm.
important,
Right.
right? So get them in 5 days a week, do 1,000 yards 5 days a week.
That's my,
Right?
yep.
They're going to probably get, the
Yep.
runner especially is going to get more out of that than 2 big swims a week,
Mm-hmm.
right? And once again, we could back them off of their running. The
Yeah.
one other thing I want to talk about with running, John, is especially when you're running fatigued all the time, is that form really does matter.
Yeah, right. No, you're spot on. Mm-hmm.
And work with somebody that actually can help you with your form,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because there's less room for, in my opinion, there's less room for bad form in triathlon,
Mm-hmm.
because when you're fatigued, your form gets worse.
Yep.
So
That's important. And yeah, being able to sustain a good form throughout a 13.1 or 26.2 is it's not easy to do after getting off a bike, a long bike ride, but that is critical.
and so like, don't get me wrong, like I think you should run fatigue some. You're
Hmm.
going to run fatigue sometime as a triathlete,
Yeah.
but when you're running fatigued, that's when you need to know what good form feels like and
Hmm.
really focus on it and have good mantras and good whatever the case may be. Like recognize when your hips start to really wobble, or your ankles start to wobble, or whatever the case is for you.
Yep.
You start to lean back or whatever you
Hmm.
do. And at that point, it's like, slow down, maybe even walk for a minute
Yep.
or two and refocus and get back to good running form. I think it's a critically missed thing in triathlon running,
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
running form matters.
Mm.
Yeah,
Well, we covered a lot of ground.
yeah, as usual, as
Yeah.
usual. So that being said, last question I have for you, because this happens to both of us,
Oh, yeah.
is what do you tell just a general person, like, hey, like I'm thinking about doing a triathlon. I want to like, and we're going to go now to the person that's never done a sport.
Uh, First question I typically ask is the open water swimming question. If it's an open water swim, have you swam in the open water before?
Yeah.
And depending on what they say, yes or no, will sort of drive what happens next. But if they say yes, then it's usually so what's your running like? And then I try to get that information, and then I'll go to, well, what kind of bike do you have?
You have a bike.
Yeah, did you have a bike? That's right. And then
And so,
then
so just
though, I go in that order though. It's really sort of interesting how I,
so we just went through this with the UNLV Tri Club,
yep.
right? Literally, you and I just went through this.
Hmm.
And the kids, when they asked me on our first meeting, there was a group of them. They're like, "Is this possible?" And my first question was, "Can you swim 750 in the open water?"
All right, right.
I don't know. I've never swum in the open water. Well, then you don't know.
Let's find out.
Let's find out. Or how far can you swim in the pool?
Hmm.
If you
Hmm.
come and says, "Well, I can only swim 50 in the pool," that's a little bit different. I mean, and you and I both know, like the swimming probably is the most important, because if you can't get through the first one,
Yeah, yeah, right.
it doesn't matter.
Yeah, yeah,
If I can't swim like if it's a sprint race and I can only swim 400 and it's a
yeah,
750,
yeah.
well, it doesn't matter how good of a biker you are if you
Hmm.
actually don't get out of the water.
Yeah.
So I'm the same with you. Like that's my first thing too.
So it's interesting though, in the way you said that question, though, is it possible? I think we both have the same response. Uh, yes, it's possible. Yes, you can do it. There are so many different types of people that do these events. It's not just your magazine cover type of person. There's people in all different physical challenges and different diseases that they're dealing with. There's a wide variety of people, ages, what have you, sizes. So yes, you can do it, but it may take a little bit more for people to prepare
And that's
for.
the thing. When we first met these students, they had 6 weeks till the first
Yeah,
race.
yeah, yeah. Right, right, right,
Right.
right,
So
right.
is it possible in 6 weeks?
Yeah,
If
yeah,
you've
yeah.
never swum before, it might actually not be possible in 6 weeks.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah,
If
it may not
what's
be
going,
right.
and that's okay, but is it possible
Mm-hmm.
in 12 weeks? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Or 14 weeks or 18. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
possible.
yeah.
But
Right, right, right.
once again, if someone came to you and said, "Hey, John, I've signed up for Ironman Arizona on Sunday, and
Mm-hmm.
I signed up yesterday. Is it possible? Can you
Yeah,
swim 2.4 miles in the
yeah.
in the
Right.
open
Do you
water?
have a bike?
Do you have a wetsuit? Because it's kind of
Yeah,
cold there.
yeah, yeah.
Do you have a bike? Like, that's a
There's a
different
lot
thing
of
than then someone says, "Hey, my friend's doing Ironman Arizona on Sunday.
Okay.
I want to do it next year.
Yeah, yeah,
Is it possible? Yes, it's
yeah.
possible.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
All
love it.
context. So awesome.
Hey, this is fun.
I love it.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, John. I know I don't say it enough, but like I truly enjoy our Friday nights
yeah.
together.
Me as well. This is fun, and it's good to rehash or go over things that sometimes we think are straightforward, but they're really not when you really start diving down into them. So it's
All
good
right,
to,
and next week we had a special Black Friday episode.
yeah.
I'm gonna try to not be hypothermic. I think
Okay.
the last Thanksgiving because I'm gonna be in San Diego and I'm gonna do the Friday evening La Jolla swim.
Awesome.
So I'll let you know. We have to change the time a little bit so I can actually dry off and warm up this
Yeah,
time.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, right, right, right.
But the last time I did it, I didn't have a thermal wetsuit or booties. I got both this time.
Okay.
I'm the
Yeah,
new.
that was a little chilly.
All right, John. Hey, have a happy Thanksgiving,
And you as well.
and we will talk next week.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks.